Hi, so my name's Becky, and I'm delighted to be talking once again to Roger Jackson, trauma therapist and man of many, many other talents related to body work and understanding the nervous system. And today we're here for part 2 of his pandemic survival kit. And we got to a very, very exciting point in our conversation yesterday where Roger began talking about how the nervous system is impacted and what you need to know about the unknown. So I'm hoping that we're going to cover that amongst other things today. But thank you very much for being here. Roger, where would you like to start?
Thank you, Becky. It's nice to be here again with you. I don't mind where we start, if I'm honest, but there's something about the unknown that seems alive at the moment. I know in my own life, I work mostly with groups and with individuals, and that's always in person, or always has been. And this lockdown has made all of that impossible. So it has been very much a case of finding all of the doors shut, so to speak, and having to really rethink from scratch what to do at the moment and how to make the most of this time more than anything else, I think. And so I think many people are in similar situations, whether that be that they're in the same job but suddenly they're at home and they have to look after the kids at the same time, whether they have lost their work entirely, whether there is economic worries. I think for many of us, and even on a larger scale, on a social scale, and even on a worldwide scale, there's a certain not knowingness that's happening right now. We don't really know how long the pandemic will go on for. We don't really know when the lockdown will be relieved. We don't really know if we need to be using masks, in what contexts. There's lots of questions that there are perhaps lots of different answers to.
And we don't know what things are going to be like when the lockdown ends.
Exactly. We don't know what it's going to be like. And we don't know within that world what options will be available to us. So we have this whole process right now of moving out of the known, moving out of what we could easily call our comfort zone, that which we've been doing, where we feel safe and perhaps where we feel skillful, and we're suddenly moving out into an entirely unknown world. So as we step into the unknown and we step out of the comfort zone, we start moving into this whole area, this proximal zone of potential growth, but also of challenge. So,
and is that when you say proximal zone, is that referring in relation to the nervous system?
I wasn't referring to it directly in relationship to the nervous system. I was referring to it in terms of what is our comfort zone and what's the area close to the comfort zone, which is close enough to the comfort zone for us to grow, to be challenged and to grow, but without actually being overwhelmed and losing our center. So it's like we can come out of our comfort zone, be challenged, grow a little bit, and our comfort zone will actually expand slightly. And so it's that area close to the comfort zone which expands out slightly. Now, going back to what you've just brought up in terms of the nervous system, this would be us pushing out beyond the normal realms of the social engagement system, which we discussed so much yesterday, and the slight activation, for example, of the sympathetic nervous system, which mobilizes us into action to get things done. So it's kind of pushing the boundaries of that outwards. And generally speaking, when we step into the unknown, it's very common that we will get all kinds of reactions in our nervous system. Perhaps we'll have sweaty hands, perhaps Perhaps our legs will feel like jelly. The sweaty hands is a sympathetic reaction. The jelly legs is a freeze reaction. So how do we nurture ourselves? I like that phrase. How do we nurture ourselves and really have the resilience to be able to step out of the unknown into this nearby area which we're challenged to, which right now, which is definitely the unknown? How do we step into the unknown to actually expand out and grow a little bit? So I think right now this is a really key question, because somehow we're all being forced out of or many of us are being forced out of our comfort zone, being challenged and actually having to grow and really transform ourselves into something new.
Okay, so I just want to sort of go back a little bit and just check a few things. So in terms of the nervous system reaction, does the nervous system always get, what am I trying to ask? Does the nervous system sort of, is a typical response to the unknown to go into this sympathetic arousal? Or are better regulated people, for want of a better way of putting it, always able to meet the new with a sort of level of stability? I'm probably using really inappropriate terminology here, or wrong terminology. I'm trying to understand whether the unknown always triggers at least a momentary response outside that sort of safe but challenging growth zone. So that's the proximal zone, isn't it? It's the sort of where you can grow, but with enough safety to keep expanding. Whereas there's a level beyond that where you go into shutdown or fear that is not conducive to being able to grow. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And the terminology is fine. It's easy for us to understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it this way. One thing that comes to mind is sports.
Yeah.
So if we want to play sport, if we want to play football, we need sympathetic nervous system. Now, which is going to activate all our muscles. It's going to make our heart beat faster to make sure we pump more blood out to our body so that we're more explosive in our action. So, but this is done inside a context of mutually agreed upon rules. And those mutually agreed upon rules create the safety net. So we activate the sympathetic nervous system, but in a state of safety. Now, with the unknown, the rules aren't clear. And so we're testing the waters as we go. And so there will normally be, I think, there will be sympathetic activation. And it will also be, let's say, the brake will be slightly held on by the social engagement system. So it's how do we maintain this tension between that which is activated because of the fear of the unknown and the inner calm and resilience that we have in ourselves and in our resources. So it's kind of it feels like a balancing act as I explained that, which allows us to, despite the fact that there is a fear factor coming up of what's going to happen, it's balanced out by the personal resiliency. So it's a lot about how
tell us, all about that. Love to know all about resilience and what that is and how we develop it and whether we even can develop that in the context, this, no rules context that we're in, or lots of new rules context that we're in.
Yeah. So resiliency is, I like the term, I can't remember who I heard use this term, but bounce back ability. So it's how long it takes us to move from, let's say, either a sympathetic hyperarousal, where we're suddenly super activated to move, how long it takes us to drop back down into a normal state of social engagement, which I think in a standard case, I think it's about 20 minutes, but I'm not entirely sure about that. So for example, if I have a huge fright, after about 20 minutes, probably my nervous system and my heart rate will just be at a very normal speed again. So that, I think that's around about the time period of just a kind of normal resiliency. And that works in the opposite way around as well. If there is something that drops me into freeze, how quickly do I go back into social engagement? I think I mentioned yesterday this idea of a dynamic equilibrium of how we go up into sympathetic action and down into parasympathetic action and up into sympathetic. So when we get more stressed and then we come down and we relax. And that's a healthy pattern, so to speak. So the question of resiliency would almost be, well, how wide can that be? You know, how high can I go and still recover without getting stuck in, for example, a panic attack? So how, I mean, resiliency, I think, is, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but this comes from physics, and I think it's how high an electrical charge can you pass through matter before it will break or decompose or
oh wow.
So it's the same idea. What level of charge of stress can we handle and still come back into our original shape without being deformed by that moment? So this is the idea of resiliency, or bounce back ability to return to our normal state. So, I mean, one of the ways that we grow resiliency, I mean, there are many ways, and it depends on, first of all, this will be intimately linked to our childhood experiences and the experiences that we had of nurturing from our parents or from our main caregivers. So, for example, if I fell and hurt myself, was there somebody there to look after me and show me that even though there is pain, there is still love that's holding that pain, and so that will just regulate again? Or taking it into more extreme examples, were there situations when I was able to perhaps confront a caregiver, and then after that confrontation we could make up and repair? And so we start to realize that it's okay to get angry, and that's part of life, and then we can repair it and we can go back into a normal state. So if we've had these trauma-proofing childhoods, they're going to help us give more resiliency naturally. Whereas if we've had parents who perhaps haven't looked after us in that way, or they've been very reactive, they haven't been able to repair, perhaps we naturally have a fear of the sympathetic. So as soon as something starts stressing it, we just go off the scale because we don't know where it comes down naturally, if that makes sense. Yeah. So how do we rebuild it? I think it's about, or how do we build resiliency? It's about learning to feel a little bit at a time. What's generally referred to within the trauma world as titration. Well, it comes from chemistry, actually, with this idea of if you add a drop at a time, then you can create smaller chemical reactions so as to avoid explosions. So it's the same kind of idea here. If we can begin to feel small amounts of, let's say, sympathetic arousal, and then come back into resiliency, back into the social connection, each time it will be easier to feel a little bit more. And this touches into this idea of the proximal zone, the zone of proximal development, which I can't remember. I think it was a Soviet psychologist, but I can't remember his name right now, who came up with this idea of the zone of proximal development. But it's this idea of just bit by bit, we push our boundaries slightly more. So each time we do something, but each time it's that process of moving from the known into the unknown and making the unknown known. And so we open up to feel a little bit more.
And is this something, and I know that, of course, this can be done in a therapeutic context, and that's a lot of what is done there and what is the value of that. But I'm wondering if this is something that we can do for ourselves, you know, in these times. What are your thoughts about that? And how, you know, do you have any examples of how that might be possible to create small enough increments in exposure, or big enough trauma proofing now, either by having, you know, communities or friends around you, even if it's online, that support you as you move forward?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things. I mean, we can do things on our own, similar to what we saw a lot in the video of yesterday, just ways of activating the vagus nerve, you know, the famous gargling session that we had. And, you know, some of these things just helping to bring us into regulation to start with. And then I think starting to build up social networks around us, whether that's with family, whether it's with friends, whether it's with new people that we start to meet, work colleagues, starting to build relationships which are based on mutual growth, helping people to grow. I think this is a beautiful principle of getting through life, to be honest. I think helping the other person to grow as I grow as well. But then that touches on something which is, I think, more profound, which has to do with personal responsibility and our personal path of life, transformation of whatever it is we want to do. And I think it's the experience of just taking very small steps towards whatever it is we want to do with our lives or whatever we want to achieve. So when I say that, I used to work with a group of men doing men's rituals for a period of time. And something that used to come up a lot in those, we would talk about the ideal and the possible. So often I would find that people would say they would have these grand ideas for their life. I really want to do this. I want to achieve this amazing feat. But it was so big and it was so perfect in a sense that it was unattainable. Because I'm just little me down here on my sofa and I've got this big dream up there and it's so far away that I don't even know how to start. So separating a little bit from the ideal, like having the ideal as the direction, let's say, but then looking for very, very small steps towards it, which would be the equivalent, say, of just pushing very, very slightly, titration, very slightly, just pushing back the boundary of the comfort zone into that proximal zone, just pushing a little bit further each time. And so building slightly more resilience in the nervous system each time. So that's going to start pushing and opening more resiliency on the one hand. And it's also going to give a whole dopamine-based response of reward, of feeling like we're achieving small steps on our way towards that goal. So I mean, I think this is just really, really vital. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that, about heading for an aim. So people that are interested in that should definitely go and have a look at, or a read of his books, or a listen to him.
And if you're open to this question, the question that's arising is, are you applying this personally in your life at the moment? And if so, would you be willing to share a couple of sort of really practical, tangible examples where people could say, oh yeah, I could, that's a step I could take, or I can see what a parallel step would be for me.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can share?
Yeah, I mean this.
Yeah,
what's happening?
Split screen interviewing.
Yeah. So before yesterday, I had never done a split screen interview or a live Facebook or video conference where I'm being interviewed and asked about the things that I work with. So it's interesting for me. There is a desire for growth. I want to grow and I want to open my audience and I want to be in contact with more people, because I believe that I can help people by doing that. But as soon as I consider the idea of opening it up, there's immediately heartbeat goes up, sympathetic reaction. The hands start to sweat. This was yesterday what was happening. And I can really feel that tension. So before we started the video, we did a little bit of social engagement activation. We did an exercise just to help ourselves center, because this was something new yesterday for both of us. Now, let me ask you.
Yeah, no, I've never. You're the first person I've ever interviewed split screen.
So let me ask you a question, and we'll see if we can prove some of what we've been talking about today, which is our second run at this. Do you feel more relaxed and more comfortable, or less relaxed and less comfortable than yesterday when we did it for the first time?
I feel more relaxed and more comfortable.
Yeah. So my
body feels less tense today.
Yeah. So this is the exact example. Yesterday, the idea of this was outside of our comfort zone. It was within that proximal zone, but it was outside. And so we pushed each other and we sat down and we managed to work out the technical difficulties, and we did it. And today we're doing the same thing. And just like you, I came into this meeting today, or this interview, feeling more relaxed about the idea, just more at home within my own body in the process. Even though yesterday I felt like I definitely dropped into a comfortable space quite soon after beginning. But today it feels like I began in that place. So this is an example of just that level expanding out. And in the same, please do.
So what I'm noticing though about this example is that it happened that for both of us, this was inside a trajectory of something we both knew that we wanted to do, and by chance by inspiration, we ended up having the conversation and deciding to do this. And it just so happens that it fits something that you want to do or be or create, and it also fits something that I want to be, do or create. So we're both working inside what we know to be a positive trajectory in terms of what we each want to create. So there was that motivation, that draw, that creative urge or impulse towards, and we knew that we were moving in that direction. So even though, tech can be horrible and trying new things and all the rest of it can be sort of activating, we were still held within the container of knowing that it was something we wanted to do. And that's very different from having to do your taxes or everything and all the other things that we're having to do right now, and the other things that we might feel we have to, rather than there being a want to. And there's a whole sort of difference between things I know I want to be, do or create, or things I feel I have to or should do from a place that starts from fear in the first place, or anxiety about my life circumstances, my income, or all of the things that people are dealing with at the moment. And so what I was go ahead.
Well, just closing up on one of the things you said there, just in terms of us doing it together, which I don't think is something that should be ignored, is the fact that we were doing it together. So despite the fact that there was a sympathetic activation, it was the mutual activation of our social engagement system that took us through it so much easier. That's why it was actually created. I'm sure it would have been much harder if we hadn't been planning it together. So this is what I was coming back to when I said earlier about just building communities around you. So it can just be somebody else, and you could just be talking to them about what you want to do, talking to them about what you want to achieve. And just by talking about it, it starts linking the calm sensations of the social engagement system with the task at hand.
Wow. I'm just having revelations here.
So we're coupling the two things together. The sensation of the calm, we're getting it out into the world, and the idea of the task. So it stops just being something which is internalized. So that on the one hand. And then just dropping into what you were saying about we had a shared goal. And so that kind of gave us a guide, if you will, about what we wanted to achieve. And there are many things that we have to do which we perhaps don't want to do, like the taxes. I think this, I have areas of gray here, but I have an intuition that there's something about just having your life directed towards what you want to do. So I've known for a while that I love working in a therapeutic context. I love working with people. And that's very much a guiding light for a whole part of my life. And so within that context, there are many things I have to do that I don't actually enjoy. For example, let's say part and parcel of designing a course and actually setting up the web page information. I don't enjoy going on the computer and putting all those things in, but those things belong to a greater cause. So in the same sense, how can we find, I guess, meaning, a greater meaning, which will include all of the things that we have to do?
Well, what I'm hearing is that you feel basically that your life is on track and you're in alignment with who you are and who you want to be and become. And that's creating like a context that's like you've got yourself on the right track. And because of that, all of the little bits and bobs that you might have to deal with are all taking place within that context. So for somebody whose life wasn't on track or didn't feel basically safe or contained within a context that they wanted to be in, it's going to be a very different ball game.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing also is just the importance of context generally, both for right now, the context of somebody's life, their whole life, but also the fact that we're doing new things together, that changes the context. And what was the phrase you used earlier? The trauma-proofing experiences. So I think that's a real, hashtag trauma-proofing choices, hashtag trauma-proofing choices. It's like, if you want to do a new endeavor, a new venture, then do talk to people, do find friends that you can do a first or next step or a baby step with, so that you are regulating your system not to freak out as you move into new choices and ventures and so on. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think we're touching one of the deepest existential questions of life, which is, what's the meaning of life? And can we find a way of putting meaning into our life? What is the personal meaning that we can all find? I'm not sure if I know of a deeper question. And I love the fact that we've arrived at this, because we were talking about regulation of the nervous system yesterday. I mean, this is very much part of the hero's journey that is repeated throughout mythology and stories and Disney movies, and I think it's talked a lot about by Ken Wilber and Joseph Campbell, and it's this process of...
Well, Joseph Campbell wrote the book.
Yeah, exactly, the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And Jung, of course, way before that,
yes.
He was already talking about this. And it's, that call to action, coming out of our comfort zone, going into the unknown, and really allowing that process to transform us, because in the process of that, there will be all sorts of parts of us that won't be able to come along. Bringing it down to earth, just the part of me that perhaps doesn't want or feels fear of being exposed by coming on a video, that part has to die to be able to come onto a video. And so this is where we touch into, as we go from the known through to the unknown, there is necessarily a process of death and rebirth as we come back out the other side transformed. And this is happening all the time. There's smaller versions, and then there's probably a whole life version as well. And I think one of the interesting things here, and I'll give it back to you, is just how do we find the resilience? We don't have to have perfect resilience. We just need good enough resilience to just keep making little steps and not get stuck. So, we don't have to all be, some Superman. We just need enough to make little steps in the right direction as much as possible without getting stuck in the same place for years or for decades. And And that happens. We get stuck. And so if we have other people around us, they can help us. But essentially, we need to recognize when we get stuck and take responsibility and try and move out of that.
But I would add to that's not enough to notice and take responsibility and try to move out of it. What's needed is to have effective tools, methods, and things that work, because it's also possible to try all sorts of things that don't actually work. And that's why, you know, trauma-informed approaches are so important, and trauma-informed holding containers, for example, at events where people's stuff gets brought up. It's important that there is a trauma-informed understanding, because otherwise people can become very judgmental. People around those who are stuck can be like, you know, well, why hasn't this changed, or why hasn't that changed, or you just need to try harder, or blah blah blah. And none of those things work. You need something that actually makes a difference to the nervous system, which is why all of the trainings that you've done and all of the lineages that they've come from are so important and needed, so that, you know, one would hope in 10, 20, 50 years time, people won't be getting stuck anymore.
I think there are more and more trauma-informed activities appearing, more and more trauma-informed schools, more and trauma-informed nurseries, trauma-informed massage, trauma-informed therapy. And I think given a certain amount of time, this will just drop into the awareness of society. I think 20 years ago, I don't remember hearing the word trauma very often. Even 10 years ago, I didn't hear it very much.
Well, it was understood differently then. It was used, but it was often thought of as an emotional thing. It wasn't recognized the impact and restructuring that it had on the, you know, neurological level.
Yeah. Exactly.
So the understanding has shifted massively. And there's something you said.
I was going to say, I like to think that in years ahead, we will start creating schooling systems that are based on safety first, and which help teach children when there is a major activation of the nervous system, how to regulate. So how do we come out of freeze states? How do we do that? What does that look like? And again, we just go back to yesterday's video. You know, the VU, the hands. These are really simple things, and these are simple things that it would be great to be teaching kids of probably all ages. But for some reason, I imagine at the beginning of secondary school, I imagine this being a vital time to learn about this. But probably even younger, it can be done.
It can. And I know that it is being done for children with special needs and sensory processing issues and so on. But I would like to, and that's another whole conversation, whether it's one we'll cover in this series or not, I don't know. But there's one thing you said earlier that I'd like to just come back around to. And you were talking about meaning making. The making of meaning and in our lives. But there's another, and that can sound quite sort of outside in. There's another model or perspective, if you like, which is to do with the emergence from the inside out. And I just wanted to sort of ask you about that, sort of the idea that the seed has all the potential in it already, and it's about putting it in the ground and providing the right conditions for it to flourish into what it could potentially become, as opposed to the way that we tend to be, you know, schooled, which is that bumblebees get taught that making chocolate's a better idea, and that's what they all need to learn how to do.
Sorry, I did not understand this about bumblebees and chocolate.
Okay, so a bumblebee naturally makes honey. That's what it's here to do. It's designed to do it. It does it brilliantly. Nothing can do it better. And in many ways, our school system and our society takes our abilities and capacities and diverts them to doing something else. So that would be like trying to make bumblebees make chocolate.
Make chocolate, okay.
It's a different, you know, their capacities get diverted into doing something that someone else thinks is a better idea than their natural expression. So I just wanted to sort of bring that into the conversation and find out about your perspective on emergence as opposed to meaning making, or how they fit together.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's definitely not something that I am studied in. It's definitely outside of my field, and it's just an area that I can delve into for fun, very happily. But by no means do I feel like I have a background within this question. But I feel like, I mean, I have to touch into my own story to respond to this, and I feel like somehow all of the, let's call them the important steps in my life that have really marked a whole next section of my life, none of them were heavily planned beforehand. They all somehow unfolded, and in many cases with quite a few synchronistic occurrences that suddenly just shifted me into a different direction. And I'm a big believer in that. I'll often, which is interesting, because at the same time, whilst I was looking to create some kind of change, and so I was thinking about where am I going to go, what am I going to do, how's it going to be, what occurred was not was not actually what happened. Sorry, what occurred was not what I had pre-planned. So in that sense, I feel like there is perhaps a necessity for a level of questing towards a goal, and necessarily not being attached to what that goal is actually going to be, and allowing ourselves to follow that which emerges. So just a simple example of this, I was working as a massage therapist. I've been working for a long time, and I've been noticing the same patterns coming up in clients. And I've been noticing, okay, there's something here that I'm not resolving because the same thing is just repeating. And so I went and had a chat with one person, and they mentioned somatic experiencing as a possible avenue. I said, okay, this sounds interesting. And I decided to go to Esalen in the States, which is the home of Esalen massage, California massage, 5 rhythms, Gestalt therapy, upon the recommendation of another friend. And I got there and I spoke to a few different people, but the first people that I said, hey, can I sit down with you and tell you about what's going on for me? Every single person I sat down said the exact same thing to me, just somatic experiencing, just one after the other. So now I'd been thinking of doing a psychology master's. I've been looking at other options, and suddenly everything just went, no, it's that way, with total coordination, it felt like. So that, and that appearance, I mean, Jung talks a lot about these moments, these synchronistic moments, but it really felt at the time like I was being guided in a very clear direction. You know, I was putting input into it. I was moving. I was asking. I was going. But at the same time, there was just a very clear path that was coming up. I'm not sure if I've responded to your question. I can't do it beyond my own experience. So I think maybe there's a mixture, actually. And this reminds me of a yoga teacher, Todd Norian, who I met in Esalen. And he said something about, as long as you're putting 1% of direction, the universe will put the other 99% in for you. He said something like this.
I like that.
But I think this is vital. Something about this, I often refer to it as an arrow. Having this arrow of intentionality, and then just trusting that wherever it takes is gonna be okay, even if there are mistakes on the way.
There's another formulation that sort of points to that, and I don't know who the author is, but it's in Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, and it was like, your job is to shake the apple tree, but don't be surprised if the universe delivers oranges.
Julia Cameron.
Yeah, The Artist's Way.
Yeah, I don't know it, but I will have a look.
I'll find it for you, because I'm actually participating in doing it again, yet again.
Great. Yeah, I'd like to read that.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation again. Thank you very, very much for being here. I'd love you to say again, to give your website, in case there's anybody listening, perhaps who's visually impaired or anything like that, if you can give your web address and any other information so that people can find you.
Yeah.
Should they wish to get into conversation or have sessions or anything.
So my website is www.roger-jackson.com, and you can find me on Facebook as roger-jackson.com as well, and you can find me on Instagram as Roger Jackson Therapy. So yeah, any of those ways are good ways to get in contact with me if you want to. Thank you, Becky, for the invitation again. I really enjoyed being here, and I've really enjoyed this more free movement of conversation that we've had today.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Bye-bye.
Great. Take care. Bye.